For those of you who have been sleep deprived enough to hallucinate, what was it like? In college, I tried to hold down a donut delivery job while taking a full credit load. I got up at 4:30 AM to deliver, and often was up until midnight or even later. After a particularly busy week with almost no sleep, I hallucinated a man crossing the street right in front of me while delivering, and I slammed on my brakes to avoid hitting him. When I realized that there was no one in the crosswalk, and no one anywhere in sight, I finished my deliveries and immediately quit my job. I mourn for those who didn't receive their donuts the next day on time. They were auditory, but I heard sirens in the distance and just kind of weird sounds, not really voices or anything distinguishable. What kind of sirens are we talking about? Like police sirens or like tornado? Mostly auditory for me, like whispers or someone saying my name. WTF, that's scary. I had a REM problem several years ago. I think my longest stretch was 4 days. Past a certain point you just don't know which way is up. Sure, REM can make you weird, but in my experience I think the sleep deprivation is actually what makes you lose your marbles after long enough. When I made sure I slept and ate regularly, it was almost like an energy drink. But when I binged and had my junky weeks, oof. Once I thought I was hearing music playing loudly somewhere outside. I was convinced it was a soundtrack to a big music festival I had attended a few weeks before that someone had also attended, and was now playing loudly in the middle of the night. The whole music's festival? Multiple bands had a soundtrack? Bruh, I couldn't hear it when I listened for it, but while distracted I could plainly hear it. Dead of the night and no music was playing. Another time I was sketching in my room at like 3 AM. I had a friend over who was just chilling with me, asking questions every so often that would lead to discussions. Slowly they responded less and less until I looked at them and they were just looking at me. Asked what was wrong. Looked down. Looked up waiting for the answer, and they were gone. Never there. They hadn't talked to me in months after they found out I was using. So many shadow people, and those took a long time to go away after sobering up. Whispers, hearing someone talking to me, my name being called, hearing someone talking about me, even though I was by myself lol. Sometimes I'd be driving and cars would suddenly be coming straight at me, lights blinding and everything, only to sort of come to and realize I'm driving on a back road and I'm the only car for miles. By no means am I saying any weird mental crap had nothing to do with the M, but in my experience not sleeping for days had a much more horrifying effect. Very calm as far as hallucinations go. I had driven for 20 plus hours and was in the Arizona-California desert. It was the middle of the night, it had been dark for hours and only other car lights and stars were visible. Started seeing things out of the corner of my eyes. Just kind of objects off a distance on the side of the road. Then it was things in the road ahead that got my attention. After a bit I started seeing fantastic meteor-light showers in the sky. Wasn't scary or anything. Didn't stop driving. To be young, dumb, and invincible again. This is bad country. I once spent 3 days without sleep. By the third day everything was in soft focus. Colors were wrong and I was hearing voices whispering my name. I do not recommend it. Mildly annoying. Cats in the corner of my vision for the most of it. I too get cats in the corner. While deployed overseas with lack of sleep for like 70 plus hours, I would black out and re-experience dream completely different scenarios that happened days prior. It was crazy, like deja vu, but for like an hour. I'd snap out of it and be completely confused for like 30 seconds, wondering which experience was real. When I was in university, immediately after my father died, OD'd on Christmas Eve after I threw him out, I pretty much quit sleeping. Maybe 3-4 hours a night. Went through lots of counseling, lots of medication, 7 different sedatives and SSRIs, but basically just couldn't sleep. We had a home birth for my niece, so even when the grief wasn't overwhelming, the newborn baby kept me up. Anyways, I knew it got bad when I started microsleeping. I'd be in class listening to a lecture, blink and police officers would be standing beside me explaining what had transpired, then blink and I'd be back listening to class. Maybe mentally be out of it for 5-10 seconds but felt entirely lucid other than time dilation. The psychiatrist at the time said I was dropping into REM because I was so sleep deprived. Happens with new moms when babies are cluster feeding. I wasn't driving or anything, so not dangerous that way, but honestly lived in a fog for years. Just like snap of the finger. Perfectly lucid horrible moment of my life. Snap of the finger back. During this period I had a thing where I quit talking to people at school to see how long they would go without chatting to me. Literally had week stretches where not a word was said. Then came finals. Started vomiting with anxiety when I tried to enter the exam rooms, which was an auto fail for my classes. So academic probation. The opportunity to protest if I would speak in front of the university senate, which I clearly couldn't do, and eventual complete failure. There were times where I was hitting the student food bank after hours because I literally couldn't walk into a grocery store because my anxiety was so severe. So definitely can happen, but for me was pretty extreme situation. Can we make a subreddit on this? I'm really intrigued to read more experiences on this. I'll get along. Scary enough it always happens while driving. I wouldn't say I'm hallucinating so much as dreaming with my eyes open. The darkness begins to creep in from the side until you're somewhere else for what feels like you've always been there. Then you feel your eyes open and bam. Adrenaline. Only lasts for a moment until the same darkness begins creeping from the side again and you're doing everything you can to keep your eyes open, but keeping them open doesn't help. And that moment of terror when you realize that you have driven a few miles with no idea what happened in that blink. It's a common occurrence for me. Nothing too out there, though, usually just visual aberrations, like constantly seeing shadows moving in my peripheral vision, mistaking random objects for completely different objects, etc. Plus occasional auditory disturbances along with the typical sense of displacement. Once or twice I had instances where familiar people were complete strangers, no recognition whatsoever. That was pretty trippy and more than a little terrifying. It was the weirdest thing. I was taking notes on an extremely boring video in theology, but then words started appearing on their own without me writing anything. They were dancing around for a bit and I found it completely normal for a bit, but then I realized that words aren't supposed to dance. Then I snapped back to reality with nothing on my paper. That's a tiny bit how I drew in product design class. I just imagine the picture I want on the blank paper until I can almost actually see the lines. Then I just trace them. Hearing my brother and other loved ones calling my name, whether they're there or not, I can hear them somewhere. For context, this happened during some military training. Laying down in the woods desperately trying to stay awake. Usually the plants turn into people. Like you'll see a figure walking around out in front of you, and then come to and realize it was just a sapling or a bush or something. Happened surprisingly more during the day than the night. When Need for Speed Underground 2 came out on PS2, I stayed up for 3 days. Aside from being extremely tired and vision hearing being very impaired, everything was mostly normal. Until I woke up standing inside Subway probably 10 miles away with no memory of how I got there. I guess I was hungry. Subway, in Jared's basement. Used to overwork myself to the point of hallucinations fairly regularly. Most were auditory. I'd hear someone talking nearby, usually saying my name or just a couple of muffled syllables. Bits of songs, like having an earworm except louder. Lol. A distant ringing telephone was also common. Less commonly I'd hear something loudly falling somewhere. Visually, I'd mostly see flashes of color or blackness in the periphery of my vision. Like when someone walks by and you just barely see them out of the corner of your eye. Tall figures in the room, such as a coat on a rack, would also briefly appear to be a person standing there. Those were probably the most startling to me. When I had a new baby, I was in Target with a baby and got a call from an officer. Turns out I had left every single door of my car open. He thought it was a break-in. It was not. Just me sleep deprived. It's honestly scary. Like one time I was on the verge of falling asleep and I thought I felt somebody run their finger across my cheek. When I snapped upright into a sitting position, nobody was there. I live alone BTW. I'm sure I hallucinated it, but that crap is scary regardless. The same thing happened to me when I was a kid. I was just falling asleep and then I feel a hand on my head and I jerk up and search my whole room. I didn't sleep that night. Over one summer in high school, my friends and I stayed awake for a few days playing Dungeons and Dragons and other RPGs. We had tons of sugar and caffeine to help us play through the pain. I was laying on the couch staring at the ceiling and I saw a leprechaun. May have been a gnome. Hard to tell from that distance. Walk into view standing on the ceiling. He looked down at me, smiled and doffed his hat to me, and started to dance a jig. I said to myself, oh heck no, and buried my head in the pillow until I fell asleep. I sat down on the couch at 6:59 p.m. not sure if I should go to bed then, after not sleeping at all the night before, or try and force myself to stay up another few hours so that I wouldn't wake up too early the next day and throw off my whole sleep cycle. Well, I felt like I couldn't even force my eyes open another minute. The next thing I know I am waking up and it feels like it is the middle of the night and I am wide awake and mad at myself for letting myself fall asleep that early and throwing off my whole sleep cycle, but it is what it is now. I get up and go to make myself some tea and the time on the stove catches my eye and it says 7 o'clock. So I assume it is 7 AM and I must have slept a lot longer than I thought and I didn't throw my sleep cycle off after all. But then I see it is kind of dark out, so I'll look at my calendar on my phone. It is 7 PM on the same day I sat on the couch. Literally only 60 seconds had passed since I sat down and contemplated trying to keep myself awake. Still can't figure out how it happened. Colicky baby woke up every 45 minutes for 6 months straight. It would take 20 minutes to get her back to sleep, leaving me 25 minutes of sleep until I was awoken back up. Not enough for a REM cycle. I once was in line at the grocery store, blinked, or something, and the cashier just disappeared. How long was I standing there? Did I pay for my stuff? No idea what happened. Another time I was waiting in a downpour at a crosswalk for the walk symbol. A homeless man also waiting was yelling about how he lost his umbrella. Suddenly my umbrella disappeared from my hand. I look back at the homeless man thinking he's wiped it, but there is no homeless man. Also the sun is out and the sidewalk is bone dry. I guess I was walking down the street with my arm up like I was holding an umbrella. Too many stories like that. I used to have episodes of insomnia as a teenager. Once, while walking home from school, I saw a car driving in my direction. It suddenly veered onto the sidewalk, continued toward me, and swerved back onto the road moments before hitting me. I thought it was real, but I was so out of it from exhaustion that I didn't even flinch. I realized a few days later that the curb of the sidewalk was too high for a car to have possibly driven over. I was in Costa Rica patrolling the beaches every night to find sea turtles laying their eggs. It was a eco vacation thing, so during the day we would be up and exploring the area. I don't know how they expected people to function on like 3 hours of sleep for a week, but we did it. I mostly remember super irrational thoughts. Thinking animal noises were people talking. Thinking monkeys were dogs up in the trees. But the hallucinations were crazy. I'm not sure if the beach really was glowing some, or if I was making all of it up, but my mind was making crazy glowing patterns in the sand. I thought the glowing stuff was also biting me. Really, it was sand fleas. We would stop and take a break mid-patrol. I'd lay down to rest and think I was still walking, then wake up and keep walking. I got really confused as to when I was awake. Never saw a freaking sea turtle. I once went 106 hours without sleep, no drugs, not even caffeine. After 48 hours it was just to see how long I could go. Started seeing movement in my peripheral vision, like Freddy Krueger darting between aisles. I felt and heard my foot go through the floor. It didn't. When I went to sleep, I was out instantly. When I woke up it felt like the best 10-12 hours of sleep I ever had. I had only been asleep for about 2 hours. I stayed up for about another 20 hours because I felt so well rested. Freaking scary, man. In boot camp for our final phase we were forced to stay up for 3 days straight. By hour 60 plus I was hearing people call my name. Shadow people darting in and out of my periphery. Falling into micro sleeps and waking up confused and completely disoriented. Was a trip. The only way we made it was cause my division was super cool with each other by that time. I once went 4 days and 3 nights without sleep. I didn't see anything that wasn't there, but my view of the world was Strange. I thought the staircase was moving and I heard a lot of noises and voices that weren't really there. They were mostly memories that were recreating themselves because my brain wasn't firing properly. I felt like a ghost version of myself that was only mostly there. ETA. I forgot to mention my cat. I have a cat and I would randomly step over her while I was walking. Except that she wasn't there. I'd feel her jump in my lap and I'd go to pet her. No cat. This was pretty constant on day 4. University student. During finals week my freshman year I forgot to take off work and ended up having to work from like 4 to 10 PM. Get off. Go to the library till like 5 to 6 AM. My lib is open 24 hours. Wake up. Take the final at 8. And just study more until I had work next. I remember when I'd get back to my dorm room around 5:30 it'd be completely dark. And I'd be seeing the craziest freaking colors. I've dabbled psychedelics a little and it's literally just like that. Like a small 10-minute acid trip before I'd completely butt out. Might get a brain tumor by age 40 but hey, absolutely killed my finals that year. Never had audio hallucinations like the rest of these comments say though. Ranger school. Literally saw people as trolls and goblins under night vision. It was freaky and weird as all heck. Back when I was younger my whole family left to France. It's literally thousands of km away. I was home alone for a month. I've never been scared of being home alone and I knew I can do everything by myself. I am in a wheelchair so it could be an issue for most, and I could always call my neighbors etc. But for some reason I just couldn't sleep. Always been a night owl kind of person anyways though. So, in all these 30 days I slept maybe 1-4 a day, maximum. Oftentimes staying up for days. A friend of mine I Skyped with once said I fell asleep with my eyes open. When it comes to hallucinations, I am pretty sure I saw my walls moving kind of like waves. When looking around everything seemed to be moving in a weird way. It was too realistic. But I knew it isn't real. Nothing bad ever happened though. I was fine and as soon as my family got back, I was able to sleep properly too. Oh cool. Finally one I can reply to. I have an insane imagination. Thanks to having Asperger's syndrome and ADHD, so it's pretty hard to imagine what insane stuff I'd see as a hallucination. I once went 3 days without sleep, and I began hallucinating. The easiest way to put it is to think of ants walking in straight lines on the floor and up walls and on the roof, making grids like in an early test of a video game, where nothing has texture, and then to feel all of the ants' individual footsteps. 3 days without sleep. I started to answer questions out loud that I was hearing in my head. My husband took our newborn downstairs so I could sleep. I usually become manic after staying up for 24 hours. Longest I stayed up for was 4 days straight. I was extremely manic and definitely not there lucidly. I'll frequently think someone is calling my name or saying something to me. I'll also typically hear and partially see things as if I'm living out a dream. Once, when I was sleep deprived, I was writing something down, looked up, and I saw the wall in front of me, but I also saw strobe lights, shadows running around, and I heard voices and Celine Dion singing. When I looked back down at my page, it was covered in scribbles I didn't remember making. Really weird crap. I also thought I saw a cow in my backyard once. I had a terrible cough. So bad that I'd cough myself awake and ended up staying awake for days on end. At the end of it I was hallucinating there's something in the kitchen, repeating that over and over again. I had a sense of impending doom, like there was some sort of overwhelming thing increasingly progressing towards some tipping point, where something terrible was going to happen. It's hard to really convey but it was terrifying. Shadows creeping up the walls, but it's complete blackness and tendrils consuming everything. Or skittering shadows in my peripheral that look like people, animals, or bugs moving, whispering, talking, or worse, singing. Sometimes I'll hear what sounds like music playing, and when I try to figure out where it comes from it disappears. So, I go back to whatever I was doing, and then I'll start hearing children singing or people talking, footsteps, or a door closing. I get this from insomnia, before I have a seizure, or if I get too overwhelmed or overtaxed. Chronic insomniac here. I have lots of stories, especially sleep paralysis that happened twice. I legit thought I was dying when the hooded man without a face hovered next to my bed. I also woke up one morning after a restless night to see a girl standing by my bed in a white nightgown. I shrugged it off and rolled over. It wasn't until I woke up later that I realized what happened. I did a major cleanse that night and never saw her in my apartment again. This was years ago. I'd usually just see a fly on the wall fly away, but it would not be anywhere in the room when I looked around. Also someone calling my name that wasn't there. Once had to stay awake 3 days straight to finish an engineering assignment. Didn't hallucinate, exactly, but I felt absurdly delicate. Like I would just keep going, then shatter like glass. Nothing felt real. Closest to hallucination was seeing colors in the dark, like static, but multicolored. I get auditory hallucinations mostly, like I can hear music playing, or people talking. Once at a LAN party we were playing Rainbow Six. No, not Siege, but Raven Shield, and all night I kept having to shoo away my friends' dogs cause they kept getting up and licking my dang hand every now and then. It wasn't until morning that they told me the dogs had been locked out all night. Well, I hope it was a hallucination. This happened to me once when I was driving home late at night. I know looking back I should have pulled over. I was driving down a country road and thought I saw a giant brick wall blocking the road, so I slammed on the brakes. This woke me up immediately, and when I looked at the road again the wall was gone and realized I had hallucinated it. Moral of the story is if you ever feel yourself falling asleep behind the wheel, don't try to tough it out. You should pull over and walk around a bit to wake yourself up. Oh my god, here's my story. Finally. So I was extremely tired because I had flown from Mumbai, India to Newark, New Jersey to St. Pete, Florida, college study abroad. So that's a 15-hour flight in a middle seat in the back, a 3-hour wait in New Jersey, and then another 2 hours flight. So basically I hadn't had any real sleep in like 48 hours on top of traveling and schlepping bags around the entire time. I was exhausted. I got to the house I lived in at the time with roommates, and one of my roommates was having a study group. I quickly said hello and that I immediately need to sleep so I won't be bothering their study group, and that I was so tired I would be unbothered by noise. I fell asleep in like 3 seconds after curling up in bed. About 2 hours later, my roommate tries to wake me to ask me if I would want pizza they ordered. That's when I started to hallucinate. I thought the entire study group was in the room yelling at me. They left shortly after I went to sleep. I then hallucinated that my roommate wanted me to give a speech to her class because they were mad I went to sleep. I tried to tell my roommate I was too tired to write a speech and that I didn't understand why they were mad. My roommate quickly realized I was losing my crap and had me just go to sleep. She tucked me back in, and about 10 minutes later I woke up feeling like I had the best night's sleep I've ever had. It was super weird and my roommates and I had a good laugh about it later. Literally happened last week. For me, I was saying something to my friends but they didn't respond cause I never said it. My brain made me think I said it, but in reality I just made an entire conversation between the three of us while the other two were talking. Happened 3 times before I actually was able to say something out loud. At first it's just small crap. Any M or coke addict has hallucinated police lights flashing, for example. Eventually it's like dreaming awake. For me, people kind of stuttered like a scratched DVD, and then they were suddenly doing things that they were not in real life. Then they would stutter again and snap back into place wherever they actually were. Everything was in real time and I heard everything that was actually happening around me, so the disconnect of what I was hearing versus what I saw was really confusing and freaky. Was in the military and we were doing an exercise which included sleep deprivation for about a week. Day 3, moving through the bush and I swear every little shrub was a Bulbasaur. You have been visited by the wealth rat. Subscribe in 12 seconds and he will share his wealth with you. Thanks for watching. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.